What is anthropology? What is culture? And what is innovation? Are the introductory tools that we're going to need to further discuss applied anthropology in the context of this investigation. First, we start with the broadest definition, the four fields of anthropology: biological anthropology, archaeological anthropology, cultural anthropology, and linguistic anthropology. If you can imagine a cake, which I have depicted here, a large two-layer cake, and this is the cake of anthropology, if you will. And it has two different layers, but it's cut into four pieces. So imagine four huge pieces of cake. But each of these pieces of cake has two layers. So you can imagine a piece of cultural anthropology, one large piece. The upper layer might be called applied anthropology. I don't know how that would taste. The lower layer would be called theoretical anthropology. So, anthropology started as a theoretical practice. You can think of professors in anthropology teaching anthropology like I'm doing now. This is a purely theoretical aspect of the field. On one end of the continuum, you could imagine anthropology purely as theory. The upper layer of the cake is where I call it applied. That is where the anthropologist leaves the academy, leaves the university, goes across the street, if you will, into the community, and actually makes some change in the world. Helps someone, whatever it may be. In the case of applied anthropology, what you are doing is taking the theory from theoretical anthropology and applying it to solve real-world problems. And this can be done in all of the four subfields of anthropology. In cultural anthropology, you can imagine someone in social work, or someone doing some sort of work helping the poor or something like that. Linguistic anthropology, you can imagine someone who is doing more than translating for one population to another, but he or she is actually becoming a cultural broker. So maybe there's cases like this where an American anthropologist will translate for Japanese business culture, and the anthropologist might say not merely limit their conversation to the linguistic change from English to Japanese, but also different Japanese business practices that are important. The business card is very important to the Japanese business person. If you want to conduct business with Japanese business people, you must be aware of that. That would be one example of applied linguistic anthropology. Biological anthropology, which is the field that focuses on primatology, apes, that sort of thing, genetics, how many people have blue eyes on the population, and things like that. Applied biological anthropology can look something like forensic anthropology, where the police might hire an anthropologist to help understand a corpse that's found. How long has it been dead? How did this person die? Etc. The TV show Bones depicted an applied biological anthropologist. Archaeology is an understanding of past cultures from their artifacts. Typically, it's the stuff of culture. It's not the symbols of culture, but it's their stuff. The face mask of Tutankhamun in Egypt Tutankhamun, right? The calendars of the Aztecs, different baskets, stuff like that. The material culture. An applied archaeological anthropologist might help go into the missions today. The missions all throughout California. An anthropologist might come and help, the local community try to better understand what happened in the missions in the past towards the future. Another interesting example of using archaeology for current culture is our garbage. A guy named Professor Rathje used to go. He and his students would look at the garbage of people's use to better understand cultural practices of people in Phoenix, Arizona. What we say and what we do is often very different. If you ask a person, how much alcohol do you drink? They might say one word. If you look at their trash, you might find out that there's evidence of much more drinking. That's not to say that people are liars as much it is to say that humans often have a tendency to minimize reality. So we have the 4 fields of anthropology, and in each case there is a theoretical base of this field and an applied application of the field. There you are. If we move on to culture, we go to a classic definition of culture from E.B. Taylor, who said that culture is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, law, morals, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. By man, E.B. Taylor meant humans. And instead of saying human, we now say they or he or she to update the language. So the first thing you might understand with this definition is that it is holistic but vague. He starts out with the phrase, that complex whole. Okay. Already he's telling you he does not know what culture is, but what he wants to say is it's this bunch of stuff that I can describe features of. Almost like when describing a black hole, I imagine. If I were an astrophysicist, I couldn't tell you as much about the black hole as features that it produces. It produces this sort of, harmonic resonance or radiation or optical illusion or whatever it is. So culture, this is a safe definition because he's not saying what it is. In terms of logic, if you try to define something of what it is, someone can always disprove you. Whereas, if you just describe features of a thing, and then you can say, and there's maybe more to it, it's a safer bet that you're going to have a more reliable response. What features that I go through shortly, I will add to this more specifically to say that culture is arbitrary, culture is socially shared, culture is learned, and culture is dynamic. With thinking about these points, arbitrary, socially shared, learned, and dynamic, you could look through things in the world and see if they have these features. Is something that I'm looking at right now cultural? Well, then you can ask yourself, is it something that's learned? Is it socially shared? Is it dynamic? Is it one of those 3? One of those 4? So that's the key that you're about to read about now. These 4 features, which will help you, I would hope, get a better working understanding of culture. Once you have that understanding of culture, we want to apply it to an innovation. Okay, because again, we will also want to discuss culture as innovation. Okay, I have this lovely picture here that I found from the University of Maryland. This is coming out of their entrepreneurship program. So often when you hear culture and innovation together, it's going to be business people who are trying to take the word culture and help create value from it. And that's fine. Culture is a universal term. We can all use it. I frankly think culture is much more than what's limited here on this page, but it's a good place to start. So if we think of culture as a source of innovation, for our species, in that sense, we can go even broader in terms of what it is. In the coming material, what we're going to do is take these definitions that we have of culture, of anthropology, of innovation, and apply it to some innovations of our species. As was said before by Franz Boas, one of the greatest innovations of our species was culture. If we go further, we could argue that one of the best innovations of culture was language. And we can discuss that further, but language is a great illustration of culture as well as being an example of culture. Finally, there's some innovations that are not that pleasant. Not all innovations are good. Some innovations are very bad. And so one example of an innovation that's very bad is racism. And so that's one of the earlier things that I want to unpack towards the end of this module is cultural relativism, so that we can better understand some cultural innovations that are rather ugly and not really helpful for us as a species. Case in point is racism. So once we get, now that we have a good understanding by the end of this module of culture, we'll get into applications of innovative applications of culture, and some of the uglier ones first before we get to some of the more positive ones. Thank you.